This podcast is made possible by High Radius.
Hello, this is Greg Clevenger, CFO of LiveVox, and you're listening to the CFO Thought Leader Podcast.
This is episode 806.
We are building financial models based on, as we talked about, drivers of the business and what are going to be the early indicators that we need to pay attention to, where we're first going to see the signs of a particular scenario playing out. So that's a critical part of this. This can't be a spreadsheet exercise. It's got to be real tactical information that we can keep an eye on to tell us, hey, this is starting to point in a direction we thought about.
Hi, it's Jack. On today's show, we speak with Marc Levine, CFO of Tanium. Among the many acquisitions with which Marc Levine became involved during his 25 years at Hewlett-Packard Co, may surprise few of his former colleagues that he counts HP's purchase of Compaq Computer as one of the tech giant's most unusual marriages. However, Levine doesn't single out the acquisition of Compaq due to the drama that accompanied it, or the two books a behind-the-scenes battle helped to fatten. Instead, Levine tells us that from his perspective, the unusual aspect of the Compaq acquisition had more to do with the integration of certain pieces of the business. CFO Marc Levine explains this and much more after this. Did you know more than 60% of B2B invoices are paid late? Well, then it should come as little surprise that the priorities of finance leaders have shifted towards accelerating cash recovery and scaling business growth. To address this issue, High Radius now connects your credit, billing and invoicing, cash application deductions, and collections into a single business process and empowers your finance team to champion your business's high-performance culture. More than 700 of the world's leading companies have transformed the office of their CFO with High Radius. Unlock working capital and reduce bad debt with the best AI-powered accounts receivable management software. To learn more, visit us at highradius.com. Hello, we're speaking with Marc Levine, CFO of Tanium. Marc, welcome.
Thanks, Jack. Nice to be here.
Good to have you with us. As always, Marc, we begin by asking you to look back and share with us some of those experiences you feel prepared you for this role, the finance leadership CFO role. What would you tell us?
Yeah, look, I think there are certainly several over my career. It's been a long career. There have been several experiences kind of leading up to that CFO role. The first was probably my very first role out of school where the company failed, went belly up. And, the lesson right away was that leaders can really screw things up. And it was also how important it was that I wanted to get into a situation where I was controlling my environment, or at least being able to influence my environment. I think that was one of them. I think a later one came very late in my career at Hewlett-Packard, and that was working for one of the CEOs who joined the company and really taught me that one person can have such an amazing influence in a positive way on creating value in a company. And I think that's I didn't expect that at that point in my career, but I think that was an eye-opening one. And then I don't know, the third was really had to do with the collection of experiences leading up to my first CFO role. I really spent a lot of time doing not only several different types of finance roles in the company, corporate controller. I got out of finance. I led a sales organization in Southeast Asia for a while, and learned about where the value in a company gets created. I think all those things collectively, over the course of my career, made a difference.
Yes, the HP chapter is the one that caught my eye. It's a very long tenure at HP. What is it? Nearly 2 decades?
Yeah, yeah. It's actually 25 years at HP.
Whoa.
Yeah. No, it was a long time, Jack.
Okay, so what year do you arrive there?
I joined HP in 1988. I joined straight out of business school, fresh with an MBA, financial analyst at corporate headquarters in the what was their medical products business. And I
We buried the lead here. I'm excited now. Really, 25 years. So you developed with that company over that period. Were you always in finance?
no, that was the great thing. I got so many up. I learned very early to keep an open perspective. I had a great manager who gave me that advice early. I got out of finance. I ran a sales organization in Southeast Asia, the Indian subcontinent. So I was selling medical equipment to doctors in Karachi, Pakistan, or Singapore, and so learning kind of how things get sold, and how to work with customers, and how that whole process grades. It really gave me a great appreciation for how tough it is for the salespeople in any organization to do their jobs.
So what I'm curious about, and those are really interesting experiences. But we talk to whenever we get someone from Intel or we get someone from PepsiCo or from IBM who actually built their career within those organizations, and they can take a look back and say, that experience was really interesting for this reason or that reason. What I find interesting is when did they get on the finance track? When did they finally say, okay, I think I'm a finance executive now.
You make a really good point. I mean, at a certain time, I thought maybe I want to get into more of the general management side of the business, and that's where I dove into the sales opportunity when it came up to run a sales and service organization. And then, honestly, my assessment of myself was I'm not cut out for sales, and I really understood that the place where I can make the best contribution and I think add the most value in a company, and HP at the time was really back in finance. And then take the collection of those experiences, working in sales, working in a different geography, working in manufacturing environments, all those experiences, I think made me ready and made me a better finance professional.
When you again after all that time, you rose to become you were like a senior vice president and controller, or can you share with us? I mean, that's were you the controller, or is that divisional
No,
or?
that was the corporate controller for Hewlett Packard. That was the last role I had at HP, and I'm not an accountant by background. I spent a lot of time in HP, uh, understanding the accounting environment, learning the finance environment, which was just incredibly valuable. But the controllership role really gave me a round out experience, if you will, to be ready for that CFO job.
Uh, okay. I'm still HP's controller. During the time you were there, there were. Did you ever just the number of companies that perhaps were acquired? Were you involved in ever so often? Did you have to become involved in sort of projects like a new integration of a company or what have you? Can you look back over your experiences and maybe just pull one out? And this was a very complicated deal. It involved several countries. I don't
Yeah.
know, but can you give us a flavor of something that you became involved in? And again, there are quite a few historic deals that HP, of course, as a large company, has done over
Yeah,
time.
yeah, there were, and look, I had been involved in a lot of different deals in the different businesses I was in. Most of my time was the CFO for the HP's enterprise business, and look, we were the biggest one, and probably the first one I was involved in was the Compaq acquisition when HP and Compaq came together, and that one was really fascinating because of the sheer size and the scale. And there was a lot of controversy about HP buying Compaq at the time, and was it the right move? But the integration itself was lengthy and complex. It really involved getting. I spent a lot of time with the Compaq team. I would be in Houston quite frequently, and learning how Compaq is operating, and what things we need to keep from Compaq, how to get the financial systems working together, the financial processes. And there are things that Compaq brought to the table that were great, and things that HP brought to the table, and we really wanted to make sure that we're getting the best of both.
Were you based at the headquarters offices in the Bay Area there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I was.
So you go down to Houston. Do you recall? I always enjoy asking this question when. So you go down to Houston to meet the Compaq team right after the deal, or you're doing the due diligence, or what was your role? Do you recall?
Yeah. Mine was more. That first one was right after the deal closed, so it was all about the integration. I was less involved with the due diligence in that particular deal. But it was the integration. So it was going down, meeting the Compaq team. I was the only, for the particular team that I was working on at the time, I was the only person from HP at the team. The rest of the team were people with Compaq experience. And that was unlike many of the other integrations that happen inside HP, where it was more HP people and fewer Compaq. It was there were some really interesting moments just trying to get to understand each other, get them to understand HP, and also for us to understand Compaq.
Do you recall? Was it a cultural difference, or they just looked at the world differently? They measured things differently. Do you recall exactly what the challenge might have been?
Yeah, we were both in the same space, so I think there was no difference in measuring the world, in measuring the business differently. It was more about the cultures of the company and how they operated. They were a very dynamic sales organization, and HP didn't have a reputation for being a real sales organization. It was more of an engineering organization with great technical talent. And that's the perspective that we had brought to a lot of businesses. So this was, that's where the challenges came in.
Yeah. So what, again, you mentioned you had a sort of some sales experience along the way at HP, among many other
Yeah.
things. I mean, why were you part of that team that went down there? Was there something that you had a unique credential, or you were just at a senior enough level to become involved in it that time?
Yeah, it's a
Or
little bit of both. I mean, I was the CFO for one of our larger businesses within HP, and also I did understand how sales and particularly field organizations ran. And this was the group that I was getting involved with at Compaq. So I think being able to apply that knowledge and that experience that I had to this team, I think brought me a little more credibility when I walked in, and I actually understood what selling was about and how tough it was, so I could resonate with some of the things that these guys were dealing with.
it's so hard to remember why that dominated. That deal was huge. It dominated the business headlines for months, and there were books written about it later.
Yeah.
Thinking back, what was going? Do you think back and wonder why did that stirred so much? Business headlines at the time. Why? I mean, was it the magnitude? Was it the size? Was it the end of the desktop era or something? What was it's sort of a milestone of some kind.
Yeah. The milestone, I think you touched on a couple of things, and one of the milestones was that I think at the time people were questioning, why double down in the PC laptop space, because it's low margin, it's tapped out. And I think there was a lot of speculation that was not a strategically smart move for the company. And then the other piece of it that got very complicated, which fed off of that, was that at the time, the legacy founder family, the Hewlett and the Packard families, really came out against the deal. And I think it escalated the public nature of what was going on, and the CEO at the time was square in the middle of that.
And that's Carly Farina, if I'm correct about
That's
that. That
correct.
was a
Yeah.
controversy. But okay, it's just when you do talk about your peers, then, and I'll move along shortly. But when you do talk to your peers that were, had a similar corporate experience at other large companies, what is it that you think set your experience apart?
Look, for HP at the time, this was one of the founding companies in Silicon Valley. It is clearly one of those original technology companies that grew to be something important and significant in the industry, and was operating at a scale that many other companies, especially in the tech space, never get to. So that made the company itself different. They had a great philosophy. I think Dave and Bill brought a culture to the company and a philosophy to the company of really getting managers to get into the details of the business. Managed by they wrote the book about the HP way, and managed by walking around and knowing what's happening. It wasn't a warm and fuzzy culture necessarily. It was demanding, and it was a recognition that technology was at the core of the business, and that's where a lot of value got created. So we had to focus on that.
Again, I'm wondering though how they develop their finance talent. So when I'm asking what set your experience apart from that other corporate
Yeah.
executive, I mean, you became a leader. How did that happen? When did you get those skills? And did HP really have a development track for you? Do you feel that way, or was it?
No, I got you. It's a great question. And early in my career at HP, there was managed kind of career progression. You would come in a role, and you'd be given certain additional roles after that to kind of step and build your experience, either managing, supervising different businesses, and getting some exposure. I think at a certain point later, in my career at HP, we as a finance organization really came to the understanding that what was most valuable, especially for leaders in finance, was breadth of experience. So not just expertise and deep expertise in one particular business or one particular, accounting, one particular activity, but do people have a breadth of experience? And even more importantly, can you apply the experiences you've learned in one business, doing one particular role? Can you apply them in a completely different business, in a completely different situation? And can you apply it successfully? And the ability to show that you can move from business to business, scale, up, and have the ability to be successful with the experiences that you've had, I think that's what we learned was most valuable. And as that happened throughout my career, I was fortunate to keep getting those opportunities because I did have that broad range of experiences.
And again, you were there until I guess 2013. Is that
That's right.
right? And over that time, finance in general, finance executives are changing in general. I mean, again, we hear it too often, but they weren't playing a strategic role. They were really just number
Yeah.
crunchers. Did you witness like a role getting broader for you, allowing you to perhaps become more strategic? Did that happen, over the years? Did you see that happen? Because your career really does go back that 25 years where this transformation begins to happen with not just the finance function but the
Yeah.
executives.
Yeah, it's a great. I think it's a great observation. Look, I think that early in my career, I would say that a lot of what was expected from finance professionals was more about value protection. It was about getting things right, governance, controls. I think the role evolved, and I certainly felt like it evolved over the years while I was at HP, where it wasn't necessarily all about value protection. It was about how does finance contribute to creating value for the business? Do we understand where value gets created in the business, how it gets created, and what can we do to start influencing the value creation piece? We can never get away from the value protection side. That's part of the core of the role. but I tend to view that as that's the table stakes in the role, and the real contribution we can make to the success of the company is through helping other leaders create value in the business. And the more that I had an opportunity to do that, I think the more career opportunities I ended up having.
So when you do leave, you step into a CFO role, and I'll mention that you've had a number of CFO roles over the last 10
Yep.
years, and you joined Tanium in May of 2021. How am I doing? Am I correct to that point?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I left HP, and that was a hard decision at the time because I felt like my career I enjoyed it, great company, but really wanted to be in the CFO chair, and did private equity, did public CFO role, and then most recently now I'm at Tanium in the CFO position there.
So let's ask the question. Tell us about Tanium. What does this company do, and what are its offerings
Yeah.
today?
So Tanium is in the cybersecurity space, and we approach cybersecurity from the perspective of helping companies, large and small, understand what's on their network, where their exposures are, do it in real time, and then help them do something about it. So the technology and our approach is about visibility and then the ability to take action and do it in a real-time environment.
And this is a privately held company. It's raised some money along the
Yep.
way. It's fairly big. How do you have a head count for us? Can you share with us how big is this company?
Yeah, company's just over 2,000 employees.
Over 2,000 employees.
Yeah.
Is it among your other CFO? Is this the largest company you've been CFO of then?
No. I think the first one I did. Let's see. The first one was after HP was larger. It was about $1 billion in revenue. The biggest since leaving HP was about $1.5 billion. The public company CFO role at Athena Health.
Can you share with us the growth trajectory been on? I mean, it's in cyber, and some of these cyber companies are growing rather quickly, but at 2,000 employees already, can you tell us something about how it's growing?
Yeah. This is a company that's been around for a little while. So this is a very late stage private, pre-IPO company, and it's gotten to scale, as you said, 2,000 employees. The growth rate's been, we've been seeing growth in the 30% range historically, sometimes higher, and it's been a well-run company even before I got here. The attention has been on, being disciplined about getting the growth, taking advantage of that in the market, but also being disciplined about running a cash flow positive, cash flow neutral type of operation. And that, in a pre-IPO space over the last few years, there wasn't a lot of focus on positive cash flow. It was all about growth at all costs.
So, can you tell us a little bit about when you step into the role, your lines of sight? Every CFO is a little different. There were certain numbers that you expected to, have visible right away, and maybe there were other things you thought needed to be measured more closely. Do not know, but can you share with us what some of the metrics that you look at frequently are?
Yeah. So you're right. Coming in, you want to get a hold of the information so you can understand how the company is performing. But I usually step into these roles, and what I'm looking for are the drivers of the performance. So anybody can read the income statement and see how revenue is doing. Okay, what you're trying to understand is what's the recurring revenue. What's driving the recurring revenue? What's the churn? What's the new sales of new ARR? What's causing the drive? What's driving the new sales of new ARR? Is it coming from a particular segment? Is it coming from a particular geography, a particular product? And understanding those things, and then going back even further, what's the pipeline look like? The sales pipeline, is it growing? Is it enough to get the expansion, the new logo sales we want? So for me, it's all about identifying those drivers of the key financial metrics and outcomes we want, and then helping the company understand and and get a common understanding about focusing on improving the drivers.
So can you share with us? Is there a in terms of the customer experience, how are you doing understanding customer churn? Curious if you beefed up the FP&A team at all to help you with some of what you're trying to measure and get a better fix
Yeah.
on. Can you share something there with us?
Yeah. Look, I was fortunate to come in, and I had a great team already in place, but we did make some additions to the team, and I brought in a great leader in FP&A. And we've got some great talent there, and we're focusing that group on getting the visibility of this information and really democratizing the data, right, and the information, so that it's not something that finance holds and protects. It's something that we push out to the organization and make sure that everybody has visibility to, because we all have to take action on it, and put that in front of folks.
Are you when you educate the team? I'm wondering, is there a management dashboard and maybe a dashboard that's used more broadly beyond management? Don't know, but what would you tell us?
Yeah. We certainly make use of dashboards. We make use of them at several layers of leadership, right? So the people who are on the frontline leadership get a different dashboard for the things that they influence the most. And then we put together different higher level dashboards as you go up the management chain. I torture my team with helping to create a pretty comprehensive view of everything related to the performance and the drivers of the performance in the company every quarter, so that we can quickly drill down and understand, what happened, where it happened, what's working well, what's not working well, so we can take action on it for the next period.
Is there any particular metric or number that you've made more visible during your tenure there? You arrived and you realized this is something we need to be looking at more closely. And right now, it's not even on the dashboard. Let's get it on the dashboard. Or is there anything?
Yeah, we've spent a lot of time getting clarity around the pipeline. So it's one of the most early leading indicators, if you will, of what's going to happen in the future. So by the pipeline, I mean the sales pipeline. So what deals are out there? What do they look like? What segments are they coming from? What's the average deal size in the pipeline? And again, back to my comment about working on things that are focused on the drivers and the leading indicators. That's one of the earliest. We're trying to also provide visibility to performance by segment, by product, understanding the efficiency of how we acquire customers and how we retain customers and serve customers.
And is there any, in terms of creating that visibility, is there anything you can share with us how you succeeded in understanding a certain dynamic, or is there a business dynamic you've begun to measure more closely that you could mention to us?
Sure. Yeah, we spend a lot of time right now trying to get into the details to understand every period what's going on in terms of number of customers that are added, number of customers that have expanded their footprint with us, number of customers who've left us, and number of customers who've reduced their footprint. So kind of the positive and negative inflow of the customer base, and not only the number of customers, but what's the value that we gained or lost in those spaces. And obviously, any company that's trying to grow and has an opportunity to grow in a space like ours, you just want to see that constant expansion and addition of new customers continuing to be growing far in advance of the customers that might be shrinking or leaving you. And we're fortunate at Tanium, that's what's going on here.
Touching on the FP&A team with you, have you structured it differently than perhaps other tours of duty as a CFO? Have you the company's obviously it's cybersecurity. It's the nature of it might be a little different, but is there a reason why you have deployed your FP&A resources differently, or what would you tell us?
I tell you that I'm running a similar play to what I've done at some of the other companies I've been at. So it's different for Tanium, so it's somewhat new for Tanium, but we're really trying to focus FP&A on aligning with key business organizations in the company, the ones that are focused on value creation. So I'm trying to build a business partner team that is dedicated to helping the customer facing resources in sales. I've got a team that's focused on the technical resources and product development, innovation, investment. And I've got a team focused on the customer experience. So serving customers, the customer experience, and how we do that. So those three areas, we're trying to build out business partner finance groups. And then I certainly have the corporate finance team that really pulls it all together at the corporate level.
So each one of those functional areas, clearly, you had to sort of educate that we really want to deploy a top finance executive with your functional area so they can understand and begin offering you some insight for whatever it might be, whether it's closing deals more quickly or what, how am I doing? Am I close?
You're spot on. And look, one of the challenges with that is, and I've seen this at different times in my career. Sometimes you get in an organization where a leader might be a little nervous of having a finance person kind of in there working with them, where they think it's, we're trying to expose things of failure, and you got to build the trust. This has got to be about those business finance partners have to think of themselves as closely aligned with the business as they are with finance as a function for the company. And that's critical. And I think every place I've been, we've been able to build that trust to the point where these business leaders, functional leaders, sales, service, R&D start to feel like these people are critical to their success. Because look, at the end of the day, if we're making them successful, these other leaders, then the company's going to succeed. And that's the key. So that's the theme that we try and focus on.
The other theme or priority, maybe, that you mentioned earlier in passing, I think, is value creation. And is it that you think too often the emphasis on in finances is on value protection and not creation, or how would you put it?
Yeah, so it's not that people, too many organizations are protecting value. That's part of our job. Part of our job in finance is to make sure that we're thinking about the governance, the controls, so that we don't have value leakage, if you will, out of the organization. But I think when I look at the organization and where finance can really contribute, it's about balancing that, getting it done behind the scenes, but really finding ways to help the company create value. So where are those levers that we should be working on? What should we be investing in? Where should the capital go in the business to get the greatest return for growth and new customer retention and expanding the customer footprint? That to me is the value add aspect of what we're doing. So we always have to make sure that the value protection side of our job is getting done. But I think most true finance professionals really want to feel like they're contributing to the success, the go forward success of the business, not just the governance and controls.
You arrived really deep into the pandemic, a year, 12 months in. Here we are still. We don't want to call it the post-COVID era. It's still lingering out there. But people issues sort of went to the forefront, and the workforce went to the forefront. And maybe you've spent more time on talent and people issues than prior engagements. I don't know. But can you share with us a little bit about how people have become part of your world or talent?
Yeah, look, talent's always been the key. So no matter where I've been, bringing in really good talent. I mean, I definitely subscribe to the philosophy of, I want to hire people who are a lot smarter than me, and put them around me to help me be successful, but also to help the company be successful. So acquiring the talent has been a challenge in this environment because, look, people have been moving around. The great resignation has really not necessarily been a resignation as much as it's been people moving from company to company for new opportunities. So we have to make sure that we're offering an environment that gets people to not only come to Tanium, but to stay at Tanium. So, that's treating people with respect, giving them the opportunities to grow and develop their careers and their professional experiences. And that's what we're trying to do.
Right. Well, we're up to what we refer to as our finance strategic moment question. And this is where we're just looking for you to share sort of one anecdote or story from the past that your lines of sight allowed you to see a risk or an opportunity, and you responded by changing things. You had a response to it. Anything come to mind when we ask for a finance strategic moment?
Yeah. Actually, I think there was a moment at one of the first companies I was with as CFO where we really didn't understand what was going on with the negative turn in sales in the company. And everybody had a theory, everybody had an idea of what was happening. And the finance team came in and really, with some great people, did the diagnostics to understand that what was really happening was a capacity issue in terms of covering customers and in the field. And so what we started focusing on was explaining that to people, making sure that the owners understood, the private equity owners understood, the management team understood, everybody agreed, and then building a strategy to turn that around, which we did. And I think that was one of those moments where you got a tough problem to figure out to turn around, a lot of different opinions, but the finance team can come in, bring clarity to the situation, and shine a light on what's actually happening with the data, and help people get to the right solution and then execute it.
Hi, it's Jack. I hope you're enjoying our talk with CFO Marc Levine. I wanted to ask you, if you haven't already, to follow us on LinkedIn. We have a LinkedIn company page. We've begun to post video highlights from some of our discussions. Not every CFO wants to participate in the video. Many do, though. So we're happy to share some of those clips. I think you'll find them interesting, and they kind of energize the LinkedIn experience. So reach out to us on LinkedIn, either link in with me or follow our company page, and I'm happy to link in with you. We're going to go to our mentoring round, where I think you'll find Marc Levine shares a little more insight into his HP years. Thanks for listening. All right. Well, we're going to jump to our mentoring round, where we get to ask you several quick questions intended to inform and inspire future finance leaders. Want you to think back to just after HP, when you did step into a CFO role for the first time, and all of the responsibilities and the board, all the responsibilities fell on your shoulders. What would you tell us if you could go back in time and give yourself a piece of advice? What would it be?
Back in time, giving advice, I would be focused on hire really smart people around you. I'd be focused on understanding the priorities of the company and where value gets created, and making sure that you're working on those things. I'd be focused on making sure that we're building out visibility to make other leaders successful. And those, as long as you're working on those things, I think as a finance professional, you're gonna help your business, and by doing so, you're going to expand your career opportunities.
To ask our guests to reflect a little bit on the personal side. We're wondering if you have a habit or part of a daily routine that you're known for. People point to it and say, "Oh, that's Marc always does this." Anything like that come to mind? It might be something a family member again would tell us.
Yeah, I do. Everybody has their habits. I've got my habits. I like to get up early. I like to get on and in a very focused time, kind of organize my thoughts about what needs to be done today, and get myself focused on what's really important. I think one of the challenges is we all have so many things that are being thrown at us, be it company, personal, otherwise, and the ability to take some quiet time and get focused in the morning on, what am I going to do today that's going to make a difference? It really helps me.
again, reflect a little on your 25 years at HP. Did you, and I know you mentioned, I think one tour of duty in the Far East, but largely were you based in the Bay Area and didn't have to move around all that much? Or what would you tell us? Yeah.
I moved around quite a bit. Started with HP in Massachusetts, and then went out to the Far East, spent time in Japan, Hong Kong, Singapore, moved to California at the corporate headquarters. And while I stayed living in California, I did a lot of travel, as I talked about when we bought Compaq, a lot of travel to Houston for a couple of years. Later in my career, we bought EDS, and I spent a lot of time traveling back and forth to Dallas to make that, acquisition work.
All right. All right. I forgot about the EDS acquisition as well. They had did you guys get the Remingtons, by the way? They always had Remington sculptures of horses and cowboys and that type of
Yeah,
thing.
that was probably one of the most remarkable findings when I first walked into the EDS headquarters and we saw the artwork in the CEO suites, leadership suites. That was very non-HP.
Well put. All right. Well, thank you for reflecting on that with us. I want to ask, is there a book recommendation? And if you say the HP way, well, we'll understand.
Yeah, no, I mean, right now, what am I reading? I got a couple things right now. A book by Rick Edelman, kind of understanding cryptocurrencies and what's going on there. And then a really interesting book by Noah Harari, 21 Lessons for the current century that we're in, and what's going on and how to get kind of clarity and sift through the complexity of all the things we're dealing with in the world.
We are up to our final question where we like to ask you to look forward finally for us. And over the next 12 months, what would be your priorities as CFO of Tanium?
Yeah, the priority right now is to really make sure we're looking forward at what's happening in the world and what we think may happen, and make sure that the company is ready for any potential swings that could be there. I mean, we've all heard it. We know about the inflation. We know what the Fed is doing. There's a lot of speculation about an economic downturn, and no one really has an understanding of how severe, when it's going to come, if it's going to come. But we want to be ready for that. So we're spending a lot of time forward-looking and scenario planning on what that means and what we can do to prepare ourselves.
And this is where we would end traditionally, but I have to add, you mentioned scenario planning. Is this something you do with the upper management, or is there part of your finance team doing this?
So we're starting by building out financial scenarios, but we do it with the leadership team. So you've got to have the leadership team weigh in on, does this make sense? What are you seeing? And so that's part of the exercise. But we are building financial models based on, as we talked about, drivers of the business and what are going to be the early indicators that we need to pay attention to, where we're first going to see the signs of a particular scenario playing out. So that's a critical part of this. This can't be a spreadsheet exercise. It's got to be real tactical information that we can keep an eye on to tell us, hey, this is starting to point in a direction we thought about.
I couldn't resist asking. Thank you, Marc, for that extra detail. Marc Levine, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thank you, Jack. Pleasure to be here.
Hello, listeners. Do us a favor. Be certain to subscribe to CFO Thought Leader on Apple Podcasts, or if you're an Android user, check us out on Spotify or Google Play. If you like the show, please recommend it to a friend.